I never thought it would come to this. The life I had built, brick by brick, was supposed to be unshakable. My wife, Amelia, and I were the perfect couple in everyone's eyes. She was beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, everything I'd ever dreamed of, and I was no different. A solid job at a prestigious law firm, a few close friends, a home in a quiet neighborhood. We were the picture of suburban success, the envy of all who knew us. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't possibly understand, was the growing tension between us. I could feel it, creeping into the edges of my mind like an invisible fog. Something wasn't right. It started small, barely noticeable at first. Amelia would come home later than usual, sometimes not until the early hours of the morning. Her phone was always face down, screen locked. She'd always used to leave it out, never caring if I glanced at it. But now she was hiding it from me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I trusted her. No, I loved her. She would never betray me. But the more I pushed aside the feeling of unease, the stronger it became. One evening, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. I told myself it was just to calm my nerves, just to see if I was imagining things. I couldn't have been prepared for what I found. The messages were right there, staring at me. I can't wait to see you tonight. This is getting dangerous, but I can't stop. It was a text from someone I didn't know. There were others, too, flirty, suggestive, and ultimately confirming what I had been avoiding for weeks. My wife was having an affair. Couldn't breathe. My heart raced and my stomach turned. I sat there in disbelief, my mind unable to process what my eyes were telling me. This wasn't real. Not my Amelia. Not my wife. The woman I had trusted above all else, the woman I had built my life with, was now someone I didn't even recognize. And as the pain began to twist in my chest, another thought surfaced. There was something more to this. She wasn't just cheating on me. There was something deeper, something far darker. The next day, I confronted her. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her hands shook when she reached for her phone, almost like she was trying to hide something else. She was good at hiding things, I realized now. She denied it at first, but then, with her back pressed against the wall, she confessed. "I'm sorry, James, but it's not what you think. I got involved with someone at work, and it's bigger than you realize. He's not just some guy. This is all part of something much more dangerous. Money laundering, James. We're involved in something huge. I never wanted this. I didn't know how to get out." My mind was spinning. My wife, the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was involved in a criminal operation. But why? How could I not have known? The betrayal stung deeper than I ever thought possible. But somewhere in the midst of my rage and pain, something else took over. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about my marriage. This was about something bigger than me, something I had to uncover. And then, as if by some cruel twist of fate, another truth unfolded before me. I wasn't just the broken husband sitting across from a cheating wife. I had another identity, one I had kept hidden even from her. I was James Smith, FBI agent, working undercover in a task force that had been tracking a money laundering ring for months. I had never told Amelia about my job. She never knew who I truly was. Now, it seemed my life had become a tangled mess of lies, betrayal, and secrets. The woman I had married was part of a criminal organization. But what hurt more than anything was the realization that she had been lying to me all along. I didn't know what to do, how to feel. The anger boiled inside of me, but there was also something else, something cold and calculating. This wasn't just about getting my revenge. This was about bringing down the empire she was a part of. And if I had to use everything I knew as an FBI agent to do it, then so be it. I spent the next few days in a haze. The pain of Amelia's betrayal still cut through me like a knife, but beneath the surface, something else was stirring. A deep, undeniable need for answers. The fact that she was involved in something so dark, something criminal, pushed me into action. This was bigger than our marriage. This was a dangerous world, and I needed to understand it. I kept my distance from her for a few days. Every time she tried to reach out, to apologize or explain herself, I shut her down. I couldn't bring myself to face her. How could I? I had spent so many years thinking I knew everything about her, about us, and now I realized I knew nothing at all. She had kept this part of her life from me for so long, and I wasn't sure what I could believe anymore. But I couldn't ignore it. The sinking feeling in my stomach told me that if I was going to stop whatever she was a part of, I had to get to the bottom of this money laundering operation. I had to gather the evidence, piece by piece, even if it meant betraying her trust in ways I never imagined. So I began to dig. I went through her emails, her work contacts, anything that might give me a clue about who she was working with. The problem was, Amelia was always so careful. She didn't leave traces. But then, I remembered something. A slip-up. There was a phone call I overheard a few months ago, one I had dismissed at the time. It had been late one night, and she was talking in hushed tones, trying not to wake me. The name she had mentioned sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I decided to track it down. I made some calls under the guise of asking for work-related information. It wasn't easy, but I had connections in the law enforcement world. One of my old contacts from the FBI was willing to help me look into the man Amelia had mentioned during that phone call. His name was Victor Marks, a businessman with several investments, none of which seemed legitimate. I couldn't find much at first, but something about him felt off. The more I dug, the more I realized he was involved in a network of shell companies. Companies that seemed to be moving money in ways that didn't add up. As I pieced everything together, the chilling truth became more apparent. Amelia's affair wasn't just about her own pleasure. It was part of a much larger, far-reaching scheme. Victor Marks was a key player in a global money laundering operation, and Amelia had somehow gotten caught in the web. I couldn't confront her yet. I wasn't ready. But what hit me the hardest was that this wasn't just a simple affair. She was involved in something that could bring down entire financial institutions, people with far more power than either of us could imagine. I realized that she had been playing a dangerous game all along, and she wasn't the only one who had secrets. I had my own, too. I had a role to play in this, even if she didn't know it. I couldn't let her continue down this path, and I certainly couldn't let her drag me into it further. But I knew I had to be careful. If I confronted her now, if I went in guns blazing, I might lose my chance to gather the evidence needed to shut down Victor and his network. There was no turning back now. The more I uncovered, the deeper I was pulled into this dark world, one where betrayal and trust were commodities to be bought and sold. And I was about to find out just how far Amelia was willing to go to protect the people she had been hiding from me. As the days passed, I found myself growing colder, more methodical. The anger that had initially burned through me like a fire now simmered under the surface, controlled but always there. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was a man with a mission. The emotions of betrayal had been replaced by something else. Something darker, more focused. The lines between personal and professional had blurred, and I no longer knew where one ended and the other began. I continued my investigation into Victor Marks and his connections. It was a slow process, but I was used to patience. After all, this wasn't just about catching a cheating wife. It was about dismantling an entire criminal operation. Amelia's betrayal was personal, but this was about justice. Or maybe, at this point, it was about revenge. I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was that I was in too deep to turn back. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how far-reaching this operation was. Victor Marks wasn't just laundering money through shell companies. He was tied to political figures, high-ranking bankers, and a network of people who could destroy lives with a single phone call. And Amelia? She was right in the middle of it. She had always been smart, but I never thought she was smart enough to be involved in something like this. The thought of her knowingly being a part of it, of her deceiving me on this scale, made me feel like a fool. I had to confront her again. I had to get the truth, the full truth. So, I waited until she returned home one evening, looking exhausted as usual. I could see it in her eyes. Guilt, fear, confusion. But she still didn't know that I knew the extent of what she was involved in. She still thought I was in the dark. "Amelia," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, but firm. She turned, startled, as though she hadn't expected me to speak. "We need to talk." Her eyes flickered, and I could see the way she was bracing herself, her posture tense. James, I've told you everything already. There's nothing more. I don't think you have. I cut her off. I couldn't keep pretending that we were just two people in a marriage anymore. Not after everything I had uncovered. This isn't just about some affair, Amelia. This is about money laundering. It's about people who have the power to destroy everything we know. And you're right in the middle of it. Her face went pale, and I saw the realization hit her. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I could see the panic rising in her. She wasn't as composed as she usually was. James, I didn't mean for this to happen. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then how did it get to this point? How did you get involved with someone like Victor Marx? I leaned in, my voice low, almost dangerous. What were you thinking, Amelia? You've been lying to me for months, years probably. What else are you hiding? She stepped back, her hands trembling. I didn't want this, James. I didn't know who he really was. I thought it was just about making a little extra money. A side deal. But then, it grew. It became more. And I didn't know how to get out. I thought if I stayed with him, it would protect us. I thought it was harmless. But now, I'm in too deep. And enough. I slammed my fist against the table, and she flinched. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed her to understand the gravity of what she had done. I don't care about your excuses anymore, Amelia. I've had enough. You were never honest with me. Not about us. Not about this. There was silence for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice shaking. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, James. I've made so many mistakes. Please don't turn me in. I wasn't sure if she was talking to me as her husband or as a man who could destroy everything she had built. The words hung in the air, thick with fear and regret. But I wasn't here to play the role of a forgiving husband anymore. The man who had once been willing to forgive everything for love was gone. Don't worry, Amelia, I said, my voice colder than I felt. I'm not turning you in. Not yet. The words tasted bitter, and for a second, I almost regretted them. But I knew it was the only way to keep her in line. But I will find a way to end this. One way or another. And you're not getting out of it unscathed. Her face crumbled, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched her for a moment, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. As she broke down in front of me, I realized that something had changed in me. Something that could never be undone. The man who once loved her, the man who trusted her, was gone. In his place stood someone who knew that the truth would always be more important than loyalty. And now it was time to finish what had been started. The next few days were like walking through a fog, heavy, suffocating, and endless. Amelia stayed quiet, almost too quiet, her guilt hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. I could see how much this was eating her up, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't afford to feel sorry for her. I had to keep my distance, keep my focus. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I threw myself into the investigation. Every new piece of evidence I found only pushed me further down the rabbit hole. Victor Marx wasn't just a businessman. He was a puppet master pulling strings across industries, his money laundering operations sprawling across borders, touching everything from real estate to art markets to offshore accounts in the Caribbean. I found connections I hadn't anticipated. People in high places, in government, in finance, who were all complicit. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how dangerous it was to go up against them. And yet, I couldn't stop. But then something unexpected happened. I was at home one night, poring over documents, when I saw it. A small detail that I had missed before. It was an email, one that had been buried in a string of conversations between Amelia and Victor. The email wasn't about money or deals. It was a personal note, signed by Amelia. It was almost innocuous at first glance, but there was something about the language that caught my attention. She was asking for something, an out. She was asking for protection, for help to get away from Victor's grasp. It wasn't the first time I had heard her voice desperation, but now, it hit differently. It made me question everything I thought I knew. I called my contact at the FBI, desperate to make sense of it. I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. Too many pieces were moving, and the stakes were too high. James, my contact Alex, said when I told him about the email. This isn't just about Amelia anymore. You're dealing with an international operation. And we have eyes on Victor Marks. But we need you to stay focused. We can't risk blowing this up prematurely. The urgency in his voice sent a chill down my spine. I realized then how deep I was in it. My wife, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, was a pawn in a game that had been going on long before I ever knew. She wasn't just caught in the web. She was tangled in it, wrapped up with people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy her if she became a liability. That night, I made a decision. I would confront Victor himself. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I knew that I had to get him talking. He was the key to bringing everything down, and if Amelia was going to get out of this, I needed to make him see that he had more to lose than he thought. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, going over every piece of evidence, every angle. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, but there was something else too. A spark of determination, the flicker of the man I used to be before everything started to crumble. The man who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. The next day, I took the first step. I tracked down Victor's location. An upscale, isolated mansion on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, heavily guarded, with surveillance cameras and security teams. It was the kind of place you only find in the dreams of the criminal elite. I didn't care. I had no choice but to confront him. But when I arrived, something unexpected happened. I wasn't alone. As I approached the gate, I saw someone else standing there, watching me from the shadows. At first, I thought it was one of Victor's men, someone who had spotted me. But then I realized who it was. Amelia. She was standing there, waiting for me. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice low, but filled with confusion. I had expected her to be hiding or trying to escape, not standing in front of me, willing to face whatever consequences were coming. I couldn't stay away," she whispered, her voice trembling. "James, I never wanted this. You don't understand. He's going to kill me if I don't help him. You have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could fix it, but I can't. I can't get out. I'm trapped, James. We're both trapped." The desperation in her voice was palpable. It was the same tone I had heard in that email, but now it felt more real, more urgent. I looked at her for a long moment, the betrayal still burning in my chest. But now there was something else. Something I couldn't ignore. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to walk away and let the FBI handle it. But instead, I found myself taking a step forward. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice colder than I felt. "If you want out, if you want to make this right, you need to tell me everything. All of it." And for the first time since everything had started to unravel, Amelia didn't hesitate. She told me everything. How she got involved with Victor, how the money laundering operation worked, how she had gotten so deep she couldn't see a way out. But there was one thing she didn't tell me. One thing she never could have known would change everything. I wasn't just a man who had been betrayed. I was a man with a job to do, and that job wasn't to save her. It was to bring down the empire she had helped build. And if I had to destroy everything in my path to do it, then so be it. Victor Marks didn't expect me to show up at his mansion. It was a dangerous move, but one I knew I had to take. Amelia had opened up, revealing how deep her involvement went, and now there was no turning back. I couldn't just walk away from this anymore. I had a choice to make, and every option felt like a compromise. When I arrived at the mansion, I was prepared for the worst. There were security cameras everywhere, guards patrolling the perimeter, and the cold steel gates that led up to the house felt like they were mocking me. But this wasn't about fear. This was about getting what I needed to finally end this. And if that meant confronting Victor face to face, so be it. I walked up to the door, knocking twice before it swung open. Standing in front of me was one of Victor's men, a tall, broad figure with a menacing stare. He didn't say anything at first. He just sized me up. "I need to see Victor," I said, my voice firm but calm. The man hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, his eyes narrowing. I knew I was walking into the lion's den, but I had no choice. I needed answers. Victor was sitting behind a massive oak desk, his fingers steepled in front of him when I entered. He didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, he seemed almost amused, as if he had been expecting this moment for a while. "James, you've been digging, haven't you?" Victor said, his voice smooth, almost too calm for someone in his position. He didn't seem threatened, but I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew who I was. "You should know better than to meddle with things that don't concern you." "I'm not here to play games, Victor," I replied, my jaw clenched. "I'm here to end this." He leaned back in his chair, his smile cold and calculated. "End it? You're already too far in, my friend. You have no idea what you're up against." I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. "You're laundering money, running a criminal empire. And I know Amelia is deep in it. If she's going down, so are you." Victor's smile faded, his eyes darkening. "You're wasting your time, James. No one gets away from me, not even you." I could feel the tension building, the room heavy with the unspoken threat that hung between us. But then, something shifted. Amelia's words echoed in my mind. "If you want out, you need to expose him." She was terrified, and for the first time I realized that she wasn't just a victim in this. She had been complicit in everything. I had two options. I could bring Victor down, expose him, take him out of the equation, and destroy his operation. But Amelia? She would be left to face the consequences alone. Or I could protect her, try to find a way to get her out. But that would mean risking everything I'd uncovered, everything I was about to bring down. I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision crushing me. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about saving someone I thought I knew, someone who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't fathom. I wasn't ready to make that call yet, but I knew it was coming. I had to choose. Victor wasn't going to make it easy, though. He was already 2 steps ahead, and I needed to be smart about how I played this. "Tell me where to find him," I said, my tone hard. "You can end this quietly, or you can go down with everything you've built." Victor's eyes flickered with anger, but it wasn't the anger of someone threatened. It was the anger of someone who knew he was in control. "Make your move, James," he said coldly, leaning back in his chair. "But remember, the game isn't over until I say it is." Victor's words echoed in my mind as I left his mansion. I knew I had underestimated him. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a manipulator, controlling everything from the shadows. The weight of the choice I had to make was crushing, but it couldn't wait any longer. I had to decide what mattered more, justice or the woman I once loved. The next day, I met with Alex from the FBI. I could feel the tension between us. He could sense I was holding back, and I couldn't afford to lie. I didn't tell him about Amelia's plea for protection, about how she was asking for help to get out of this. I couldn't betray her like that. Not yet. "James, you need to understand. If you're in this deep, there's no turning back," Alex warned. "We're tracking marks, but you're walking a dangerous line. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment." I nodded, but his words didn't sink in. I couldn't forget what Amelia had told me, that she was trapped. That night, I returned home, determined to end this. But when I walked in, she was waiting for me, her face pale, eyes red. She was on the verge of breaking, and for a moment, I thought I might feel sorry for her. But I didn't. "James," she whispered, "you have to help me. I'm begging you." I didn't know what to say. She was pleading for something I couldn't give her. I wasn't her savior anymore. I had to stop pretending that I could fix everything. "Amelia," I said, my voice cold, "you made your choices. Now you'll have to face the consequences." But she wasn't ready to hear that. She collapsed into my arms, crying harder than I'd ever seen her. And for the first time, I wondered if I was the one who had made the wrong choice. The following days blurred into a haze of decisions and deception. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amelia's face, tear-streaked, desperate. But the deeper I got into Victor's operation, the clearer it became that she wasn't the only one who had something to hide. I dug into her past, into every scrap of information I could find about her dealings with Marks. And then I found it. A series of encrypted messages, buried deep within Victor's files. It was Amelia's voice on the other end, talking to Marks about a new partner. Someone I didn't know. But the details were chilling. She wasn't just a pawn. She had been orchestrating some of it, making moves on her own. I confronted her the next evening. "Why didn't you tell me about the partner?" I asked, my voice low, not angry, but calculated. She looked at me, eyes wide, and then she broke. "It wasn't supposed to go this far, James. I thought it was just business. But then I found out I was just as trapped as you. It was never supposed to get this deep." Her confession hit harder than I expected. But I wasn't sure if I believed it. She had been hiding things for so long. How could I trust her now? She was trying to protect herself, and I was the last person she should turn to for help. But then she said something that froze me. "I was trying to protect you, James. From Victor. He wanted you dead. I never meant for you to get caught in this mess." The words lingered in the air. She had been protecting me? But how could I trust her after everything? I didn't have time to figure that out. Victor wasn't going to wait much longer. I had one shot left to end this. The night felt heavy with the weight of everything I had uncovered. I was standing on the edge, knowing that one misstep could cost me everything. Victor was getting too close, and I could feel the noose tightening around me. It was time to put an end to this, one way or another. I had tracked down where Victor was hiding. A secure location hidden beneath a luxury hotel. Perfect place to vanish, a fortress. The plan was simple. Get in, confront him, and shut down the entire operation. No more playing games. No more half-truths. Just the truth. Amelia's warnings kept playing in my head, but I couldn't let her fear stop me. This was bigger than her. Bigger than me. I needed to dismantle everything he'd built. The security at the hotel was tight. I'd managed to infiltrate it under the guise of a routine check, but I wasn't fooling anyone. As I descended into the underground chambers, the weight of my decisions settled in. Was I really ready to destroy everything? Her, Victor, the life I had left? I reached the door to Victor's private office and kicked it open. He was sitting at his desk, waiting, as if he knew I was coming. "I knew you'd make your move eventually," Victor said with a smirk. He wasn't afraid. He never was. "I'm ending this, Victor," I said, voice steady. I wasn't about to let him manipulate me anymore. He chuckled darkly, leaning back in his chair. "You really think you can take me down? You're just one man, James, against a system that's been built for decades." "I'm not just one man," I replied, stepping closer. "I'm the one who's going to take you down." Before he could respond, the door slammed open behind me. I turned to see Amelia standing there, eyes wide with fear. "Don't do this, James," she pleaded. "You don't understand." "Get out of here, Amelia," I snapped, not taking my eyes off Victor. "This ends tonight." But she didn't leave. She stayed frozen, caught between us. Victor's smirk grew wider. "It's too late, James. She's already in this. She'll never leave. You'll never leave." And in that moment, everything came crashing down. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Amelia, caught between two worlds, mine and his. She had been playing both sides the whole time. Had she ever really been on my side? Or was this all a game? "I told you, I was trying to protect you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant for you to get hurt." But it didn't matter anymore. Couldn't go back. I stepped forward, not looking at her anymore. It was time to make a choice. Take him down or let this whole thing implode. I couldn't afford hesitation. Not now. In one swift motion, I grabbed the gun from my jacket and aimed it at Victor. His smirk disappeared, replaced by the realization that this was real. This wasn't a game anymore. "I'm ending it," I said again, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "And this time, you're not walking away." Victor's eyes widened as the cold metal of the gun pressed against him. But before I could make my move, Amelia rushed forward, her voice pleading, desperate. "James, don't. You're better than this." Her words caught me off guard, pulling me out of the moment. For a split second, I hesitated. That hesitation cost me. Victor lunged, knocking the gun from my hand, sending it skidding across the floor. "You're weak, James," he sneered, laughing as he backed away. "Always have been." I didn't care. Couldn't. I was done playing by the rules. With a quick, brutal motion, I tackled him to the ground, a fight for control erupting between us. It was messy, painful, but I wasn't going to lose. Eventually, I pinned him. He was out of breath, his face twisted with rage. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. It was finally over, but the cost was far higher than I could have imagined. Amelia stood silently, watching me. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched the destruction she had helped create. Victor was arrested that night. The FBI moved in, taking him away as I stood in the shadows, the weight of the moment settling over me. I had won, but it felt hollow. The operation was dismantled, the criminal empire toppled, but there was no victory in it. Not for me. I avoided the press. The questions, the faces, the sympathy. They all felt like suffocating reminders of what I had lost. Everything I had done, every choice I had made had led to this moment. But at what cost? Amelia was gone. She had left, disappeared in the chaos after Victor's arrest. I never got the chance to see her, to understand if her words were genuine or just another manipulation. She was a ghost now, her presence a distant memory that I couldn't shake. I stood alone in my apartment, the silence deafening. The love, the trust, the life we had shared, it was all gone. What remained was a shattered version of the man I used to be. I couldn't fix it, couldn't go back. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of it all pressed harder on me. I had taken down an empire, destroyed lives, but at the end of it, I was left with nothing but emptiness. No closure, no answers. I stared at the files on my desk, everything about the investigation, about Victor, about Amelia. I could have buried it all, walked away, let it be someone else's problem. But I couldn't. The phone rang, cutting through the silence. It was Alex. "James," he said, his voice stern. "We've got something. We found Amelia." My heart raced, but I pushed it aside. I had no idea what I was hoping for anymore. She had made her choice just like I had made mine. But that didn't stop the ache in my chest. "I'm coming," I replied, even though I wasn't sure what I would do when I saw her again. It felt like the end of a story I didn't know how to finish. When I arrived at the safe house, Amelia was there, waiting. She didn't look at me, didn't say anything at first. She just sat, her head down, lost in thought. I wasn't sure what she expected from me, and I wasn't sure what I expected from her. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I was scared, James. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to let go of the anger and betrayal, but the other part of me knew that some things couldn't be undone. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, "but I can't keep living in the past. We both need to move on." And just like that, we said goodbye. The world kept turning, the case closed, and life moved forward. But for me, the lesson was clear. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that leave the deepest scars. And in the end, it wasn't about finding justice. It was about finding peace. Thank you for following this journey. If it made you think, feel, or question your own choices, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button.